Do you realize that hidden treasures are lurking everywhere in our mysterious world? Sometimes it is a hoard that someone hid 1,000 years ago, and sometimes it is the traces of human activity from only the past few decades that have lost their significance and been abandoned. They are simply waiting for someone to find them, and of course, that moment eventually comes. You are on the Top Facts channel, and today, we have gathered for you the most astonishing discoveries on Earth, made in 2025. They will forever change what you believe right now. On the remote Arctic territories near the settlement of Tixi on the coast of the Laptov Sea, there is a place called one of the northernmost graveyards of ships in the world. Here, on Brusnev Island, many sea and airborne abandoned vessels rest, forever stuck in the eternal ice. In particular, the Soviet motor ship Tixi, which sank in the Pacific Ocean in 1974, and the motor ship Dnieper, from which a fuel leak was later discovered. On the island's shore found their final refuge the old marine steam tugs Sanikov and Begichev, Yukagir, and Leningrad. Besides the ships, there lie the remains of 2 air crashes, the remnants of the fuselage of an Li-2 aeroplane with square windows are clearly visible on the snow. The eternal ice that covers the bay most of the year makes identification difficult, but one thing is obvious: the endless sadness that cloaks these shores. During the construction of a highway through the Chilean Atacama Desert, the workers made an amazing discovery. They found in the sand more than 40 complete whale skeletons. Considering that this place is now one of the driest on Earth, it becomes curious that among these large-scale fossils, paleontologists identified the fin of a blue whale, as well as an extinct creature resembling a dolphin with the features of a walrus. All this was perfectly preserved in the desert sands. Scientists determined that the marine giants died after ingesting toxic algae, and their bodies were later thrown ashore by a powerful storm. All these sad events happened millions of years ago, long before the region changed from a seafloor to a barren desert. After 30 years of hunting for fossilized remains, this researcher literally stumbled upon a gold vein. That is what he called this untouched place, which turned out to be extremely rich in finds. The burials of Megalodon. The lucky man gained an incredible haul of 17 complete teeth of the ancient monster shark in just 1 week, and some specimens hardly required excavation. They were lying on the very surface. The abundance of historical bones scattered all over the site made the search easier. Apparently, in the very distant past, this was a rich fishing ground. Ancient marine predators simply swarmed here, making the territory the dream of any fossil hunter. In the granite rocks of South Africa, researchers discovered an imprint in the stone shaped like a footprint. It is perfectly preserved, but something else amazes. Its dimensions are simply incredible. 120 centimeters from heel to toe. The vertical print in solid granite has spawned fantastic theories that a giant from 7 to 7.5 meters tall once walked across the molten rock, and this could have happened about 200 million years ago. Although sensible geologists identify the formation as natural weathering with erosion patterns resembling toes, could this footprint actually be evidence of the existence of ancient giants? Or is it just another creation of nature, which, as is known, has a very sharp sense of humor? Under a layer of earth, with the help of metal detectors, researchers discovered an ancient chamber sealed with an intricate clay lid decorated with patterns. Inside the mysterious vault lay a whole treasury. For centuries, an impressive collection of gold and silver jewelry, together with antique coins, had rested there. The complex design of the hiding place and the valuable contents suggest that this was not a random storage location, but a deliberately concealed treasure. In all troubled times, people sought ways to protect their wealth. Only, have the better days without upheavals now arrived? I do not know. What do you think? Researchers who ventured into an abandoned slate mine encountered an unusual staircase. It looked surreal. It seemed that the steps descended into crystal-clear depths, but after counting scarcely 10, we realize that the staircase disappears into darkness. Surely the sight will intrigue adventurers. Just try to imagine what lies below and how deep that mysterious staircase goes. What the explorers thought was just another cave system turned out to be the largest underground chamber ever discovered. The scale of the cave truly shocks. Its smooth rock walls and ceiling height exceed 30 meters. It is so vast that even two of the brightest flashlights in the world could not fully illuminate it, and the bottoms of the underwater pools vanished into the dark. Moreover, the perfect acoustics of the chamber create a huge echo, making this underground marvel respond like an entirely different world that lives its own life in the darkness beneath our feet. Inside ancient rock faces an extraordinary discovery gave scientists a clear understanding of the ingenuity of prehistoric humans. A dwelling carved into solid rock, 16,000 years old, turned out to be quite comfortable. A whole house with several rooms and a living room that housed a fireplace. All surfaces had been carefully worked using primitive tools, and because this renovation has survived for millennia, we can appreciate the architectural capabilities of our distant ancestors. Far in a dense forest, during a nighttime journey, a tourist discovered a small abandoned chapel. Probably at that moment it seemed eerie to him, but this remarkable religious structure was erected here at the end of the 12th century and served as a place of worship for more than 600 years. Now the wilderness has reclaimed it. Since then, time has destroyed most of the original halls. Indeed, all this desolation creates a mystical feeling that someone is keenly watching you. The next explorers discovered a real architectural wonder forgotten by time. Behind these ruined walls hides a luxurious Italian church built in the 13th century. And despite centuries of neglect, the richly decorated wall details and intricate facades remain surprisingly strong. But the most astonishing item inside the sanctuary is a broken carriage of the same era. A museum exhibition without artificial new repairs and visitors seems far more attractive. Agree? In the depths of a frozen swamp, a group of military historians made a remarkable discovery. They found an entire arsenal of ammunition from the Second World War that had been preserved for decades. The wooden crates they extracted contained thousands of perfectly sealed cartridges that had lain under the ice. This impressive find required careful handling. According to strict protocols, potentially dangerous materials had to remain in the forest so that they could be properly deactivated before being transferred to museums. Imagine that while walking through a forest, you stumble upon something out of The Truman Show. For example, a massive 25-meter wall hidden among the trees and skillfully camouflaged from prying eyes. On the surface of the high walls, trees are painted so that the barrier does not stand out from afar. This huge decorated fence was clearly made to hide its contents from curious tourists. What secret lurks behind it? It could be a military facility, a secret shelter for a politician, or some other secret that even local residents refuse to talk about. On the Pacific coast of the Japanese island of Hokkaido, there is a concrete military bunker that seems to be floating in the air. It is a former pillbox of the Japanese army built in the last days of the Second World War to defend against an American invasion. Its dimensions are approximately 5 meters in width and 6 meters in depth. Because coastal erosion gradually washed away the surrounding soil, the massive structure eventually became exposed and ended up on the very edge of a cliff, creating the surreal illusion that the secret facility is purposefully suspended in the air. In an American forest, the author of this video found a graveyard of military might. He discovered a collection of M60 tanks that once served as the workhorse of the United States Army. The 750 horsepower colossi, capable of developing a speed of 48 kilometers per hour on roads with a range of 480 kilometers, now stand perfectly lined up. Next to them lie 14 disassembled M113 armored personnel carriers that once carried up to 15 passengers each at a speed of 68 kilometers per hour. For decades, they languish in their final resting place, embodying a creepy military museum that nature is slowly taking over. The legendary T-34 tank spent 64 years in a Pskov swamp before it was finally rescued from its watery grave in June 2003. The combat vehicle sank here during intense fighting in the course of the Velikiye Luki offensive operation. The tank was found standing almost vertically, its turret pointing toward the shore. The hull was covered with a thick layer of silt and aquatic plants, and months of technical preparation were required before it could be raised. The heavy machine was lifted from a 6-meter depth of the swamp near the town of Novosokolniki in the Pskov region. Local residents' stories helped reconstruct the tank's history. It accidentally ended up on thin ice when German troops tried to break through the crater, and previous attempts to raise it during the war failed. Despite spending more than 60 years in the swamp, the tank was excellently preserved, was restored to running condition, and received the name Sniper. Today, only a handful of such machines remain. In the crystal-clear waters off the island of Cozumel in the Caribbean Sea lies a captivating fragment of naval history. The minesweeper Felipe Xicotencatl, or simply C-53, served the Mexican Navy and was finally retired in 1999. Named after a general, this 60-meter ship successfully guarded the waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. At the end of its career, it was intentionally sunk in 2000 to become an artificial reef and a diving attraction. Today, its majestic wreck rests at a depth of 25 meters, and instead of sailors, its rooms are patrolled by schools of tropical fish. Off the Swedish coast, divers made an interesting discovery. In the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, the hull of a ship that wrecked here in the 19th century was perfectly preserved. In its holds remained not only 100 bottles of vintage champagne, but also rare clay bottles of that very famous Selters mineral water. This drink was so precious that it was once considered medicine and was served at royal tables. The mineral water producer left its trademarks on the clay bottles, and the batch was made between 1850 and 1867. This allows not only the company to be identified, but also amazement that it is still operating today. Before us lies a direct link between a luxurious cargo from the past and our lives. Along the Delaware River in New Jersey rests a collection of abandoned vessels. It is a graveyard of famous ships with a rich maritime history. The most impressive among these maritime ghosts is the American lightship Barnegat, a 39-meter giant built in 1904 at the Camden Shipyard in New York. The United States Coast Guard used it to guide ships away from dangerous shallows. The lightship gained a second life during the Second World War patrolling coastlines and was decommissioned in 1967 after more than half a century of faithful service. It is one of the few surviving ships of this kind and is even included in a list of 10 important historic heritage objects at risk of disappearing. From the dark depths of the English Channel, the wreck of the MV Tricolor has at last been able to be retrieved. This huge 50,000-ton Norwegian car carrier met an unenviable fate. In 2002, it sank after a collision with nearly 3,000 automobiles on board. The ill-fated vessel became famous for being involved in 3 different collisions within just 2 weeks. It is no wonder that it now lies on its side, off the coast of France at a depth of 30 meters. Salvage teams faced an extraordinary task. They had to lift thousands of cars from their underwater grave, which was accomplished and called one of the most unusual and challenging maritime recoveries in European waters. In the Bay of the Solomon Islands lies a unique cruise liner, the MS World Discoverer, whose final journey ended dramatically. The 7-deck vessel was built in 1975, and the ship had ice-breaking capabilities for polar expeditions. But on the 30th of April 2000, it met its fate when it struck an uncharted reef north of Honiara, the island capital. Under threat of sinking, the captain beached the ship in a quiet bay in Roderick Bay. All passengers were evacuated, but the ship could not be saved. Imagine that you are strolling along a quiet shoreline and suddenly discover a huge abandoned cruise liner drifting only a few meters from the beach. Once magnificent, the enormous 157-meter hotel ship named Enchanted Capri boasted the luxury of 248 rooms that once accommodated 937 passengers and 155 crew members. Now it presents a sad spectacle, having been abandoned after it drifted away from its anchor during a severe storm near Alvarado. What makes this ghost ship truly fascinating is the fact that despite plans to scrap it in 2020, the ship remains almost untouched. On board, all its furniture and lifeboats are still in place. It looks eerie, as though it has not lost hope of sailing again, while its once chic deck slowly succumbs to the merciless forces of nature. Would you expect to meet a whole passenger aeroplane not in the sky, but deep beneath the waves of the Red Sea? This Lockheed Martin TriStar L1011, an American medium and long-haul wide-body jet, distinguished by its recognizable design, 3 engines mounted on the wings and tail, served Royal Jordanian Airlines in the 1980s and later sat abandoned at King Hussein International Airport. In 2019, it was intentionally sunk to create an artificial reef at depths from 15 to 28 meters. Now, the underwater giant has become a magnet for wreck explorers and serves to nurture the marine ecosystem. A kayaker's outing turned into an unusual adventure when he visited a decommissioned military submarine. This once advanced underwater vessel was retired in the 2000s and now lives a strange afterlife, simply drifting on the surface. Rumors claimed that the submarine carried out secret missions and contained technological secrets that the public would never know, yet the government put it up for sale on eBay. Suspicious buyers even appeared who intended to revive the vessel as a tourist attraction, but then a fuss arose about possible improper use. On the shores of the Pielovskoye Reservoir in the Moscow region stands the combat conning tower of the legendary first Soviet nuclear ballistic missile submarine, known as K-19. This ill-fated vessel earned the nickname Hiroshima after surviving 3 major accidents, including an averted nuclear catastrophe in 1961. An eponymous feature-length thriller was even filmed about the incident. Now, the submarine's conning tower serves as a powerful memorial created with the participation of a former crew member, Vladimir Romanov. He himself witnessed the story in which 32 brave sailors, saving the world from impending disaster, received doses of radiation. This monument is dedicated to their feat, which kept the world from another world war. During a mushroom-picking trip in a suburb of Moscow, a man found a surreal scene. Imagine the sight of a submarine standing in the middle of a swamp. At first glance, it seemed completely authentic, but upon closer inspection, its dimensions were inferior to the original. In the end, the vessel turned out to be a marketing installation, created by a construction company to attract investors to a new residential complex. It must be said that the trick worked, and the advertising campaign fully paid for itself. In the jungles of British Columbia, tourists found not giant mushrooms, but a remarkable piece of aviation history. A Second World War aeroplane standing on the slope of Radar Hill, none other than a Catalina flying boat amphibian. The American seaplane was widely used during the war as a patrol aircraft. At some unlucky moment, it had to make an emergency landing here, and now its fuselage rests in the forest, remaining untouched ever since. In the western desert of Egypt, in the Al-Wadi Al-Jadid region, a group of Polish oil exploration researchers in March 2012 came across a Second World War artifact that was incredibly well preserved. Before them, in the sands under the sun, lay a Curtiss Kitty Hawk fighter, notable for its toothy painting. It had been here since an emergency landing in March 1942 and was identified as a P-40 aircraft from the 260th Squadron of the Royal Air Force that disappeared during a flight with Sergeant Dennis. The last report said that it was seen flying with damaged landing gear. At the crash site, a parachute was found, giving hope that the pilot had survived. But no trace of the body was discovered. Likely, the aviator managed to leave the plane, but perished in the desert trying to find civilization, which was more than 100 kilometers away. On the desolate black plains of southern Iceland, one can see a ghostly sight. There lie the remains of one of the most mass-produced aeroplanes in world aviation history, a Douglas DC-3. Its twisted metal frame against the volcanic landscape looks like a scene from another world. This aeroplane, a symbol of the golden age of aviation, made its last landing here on the 21st of November 1973. Miraculously, during the crash, all 7 crew members survived and were even unharmed. Now the plane attracts photographers from all over the world who long to capture its eerie beauty against the dramatic Icelandic scenery. In the jungles of Southeast Asia, researchers came upon a truly surreal find, a gigantic shield of an old tunnel boring machine, forgotten and overgrown. Its steel ring once cut tunnels through rock and clay, opening routes with new transport arteries. But the project suddenly stopped decades ago. The equipment proved too cumbersome and costly to evacuate, and it was simply abandoned in the forest. Today, this machine looks like an ancient monster, reminding us of grandiose plans that remained under the cloak of the tropical jungle. It is not every day one sees a huge locomotive in a dense forest. Here before us, in the thicket, stands a forgotten giant, a rusty freight engine. How did such a remarkable piece of history end up in oblivion? The railway in the Romanian state was built in 1928, and this impressive machine is a copy made after a Prussian locomotive model. It made its final journey to the German Fehlenberg, where it now rests. In the harsh desert of Alaska stands a monument to failed ambitions, the legendary train to nowhere. Abandoned railway equipment, including 3 locomotives and 19 wagons, has been slowly rusting here since 1913, ever since a powerful storm destroyed the bridge over the river. A locomotive model of the year 1910 is forever stuck 40 kilometers from the town of Nome, never having made a single run on its intended route. During the gold rush, it had been planned to run on a 215-kilometer narrow-gauge railway from Dixon County to the mine to carry gold and equipment. But since the railway company went bankrupt in 1907, the silent sentinels of that greedy era are frozen in time in the middle of the field. In the forests of Maryland, an unusual find was discovered. It could be called a time capsule. They say it is the childhood home of Sylvester Stallone, which became abandoned, yet it preserved evidence of the famous actor's early years. And, next to the estate where Rocky lived in the 1950s, visitors can find a collection of classic cars rusting on the property. Here are rare curiosities. The first Mercedes-Benz S-Class, a unique Mercedes SSK of 1929, a vintage Chevrolet Corvette Stingray, a Chevrolet Camaro convertible, and other automotive relics. This collection could have become a museum if the storage conditions were better, but as it is, it turns into just a dump of old rusty cars in a forgotten backwater. Strange that this house was not restored and sold for huge money. Now, we will dive kilometers under the Swiss mountains to discover a truly strange place. Dozens of classic Volkswagen models ended up buried in an abandoned mine. It was closed more than 40 years ago, and these dusty and rusty, partially dismantled cars were transported through tunnels by a museum owner who cleverly used the spacious mine chambers as free storage for his large collection. It numbers more than 200 vintage cars. The most interesting thing is that the owner painted the ceilings blue to deter insects, but then apparently simply left these treasures here, letting time deal with them. Some cars are tucked so deep in the tunnels that visitors continue to find new exhibits with each visit. In the depths of the forests of Washington state, in a dusty old barn, a treasure trove awaits that will make any car collector's heart beat faster. Inside this modest structure lies a stunning collection of classic American muscle cars from the 1960s and 70s. Each is not just a vehicle, but a work of art. This type earned the nickname muscle cars precisely because of the massive body. Here, we see rare Plymouth GTX, Pontiac GTOs, and an untouched Dodge Challenger. It is indeed an exceptional auto museum because many of these V8-powered beasts were produced in limited numbers. After proper restoration, they can definitely find the right buyers. In Japan, a car is by no means a luxury, but a means of transportation, which is why garages for old cars are not usually built here. They are simply left outdoors somewhere in the countryside. Sometimes one can find models that are treasures for certain automotive enthusiasts. Legendary Japanese cars, including rare Nissan Skylines and Toyota Supras, which still have plenty of fans worldwide, end up among abandoned vehicles due to strict ownership laws. Yes, scrapping a car in Japan is an expensive endeavor. So many owners simply abandon their iron steeds at junkyards. Although their parts are likely to be a costly rarity on the auto market, or the cars themselves may be valued as real treasures for collectors, these engineering masterpieces face a grim future. They will become scrap metal, never having received restoration. In a field in rural Kazakhstan, a car was dug up. The very Moskvich 412 loved by Soviet motorists that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers drove. The perfectly preserved specimen from the 1980s had, for some reason, been completely buried underground. At last, when the Soviet vehicle emerged from its earthen garage, it proved quite intact, though it had lost its paint. All original parts remained whole and, unbelievably, the tires were still capable of holding air. The interior, of course, had been subject to decay, but the car was sturdy enough not to fall apart when it was extracted from its underground parking place. The Konstantinovka coal quarry in the Kirovohrad region of Ukraine is also known as the graveyard of excavators. It is located in a remote backcountry, but in 1987 it was the youngest coal strip mine extracting brown coal of grade B for thermal power plants. In 2010 it was closed, and on the territory remained open pit equipment that slowly disappears in rising groundwater. Among the involuntary exhibits is a 16-bucket rotary excavator weighing 4,100 tons and 30 meters high. Once this machine mined more than 1 million tons of coal a year, until the tragic fate of industrial giants turned them into scrap metal. Wandering through an empty field in pitch darkness, this guy suddenly encountered an apocalyptic sight. He saw a colossal mining excavator looming in the dark like a mass. This now abandoned industrial monster reaches 30 meters in height and 120 meters in length, with its enormous frame weighing an incredible 1,980 tons. Despite spending years in abandonment and being noticeably corroded, the gigantic machine still retains most of its original switches, controls, and mechanical parts, creating a scene that looks as if it came straight off the set of a disaster film. On a quiet Japanese beach in Hamamatsu, a mysterious iron sphere appeared, leaving both local residents and authorities completely baffled. The perfectly round metal object with two enigmatic handles gave rise to various absurd and scientific theories, ranging from spy devices to dragon eggs. Bomb disposal experts performed an X-ray analysis, while experts stated that it might be a simple mooring buoy. Its sudden appearance and unknown origin turned an ordinary object into an international mystery, showing how easily a world media sensation can be made. If you know exactly what it was, feel free to write in the comments. The authors of this video found in the thickets of an abandoned airfield a forgotten graveyard of Soviet-era aircraft. Here, a kind of aero museum is gathered. We can recognize the disassembled remains of various planes, including the legendary An-2, a Soviet single-engine biplane designed in 1947, as well as the Yak-52 and Yak-18 training aircraft for student pilots and Mi-2 helicopters. Their bare silent frames could tell more stories about historic flights. But now, this graveyard of former glory is firmly conquered by vegetation. In the heart of Kazakhstan lies one of the most mysterious places on the planet, the legendary Baikonur Cosmodrome, whose name translates as Rich Valley. And even now, one can stumble upon something truly unusual there. For instance, in a giant hangar stands a huge Soviet super heavy rocket whose height is an impressive 59 meters. It was once one of the most powerful launch vehicles in the world, surpassing all competitors of its time. You can also see the famous space shuttle Buran, a Soviet orbital aircraft and part of the reusable transportation space system that made only one unmanned orbital flight before being forever entombed in this time capsule. In December 1980, in Rendlesham Forest in the English county of Suffolk, there occurred a UFO incident that became the most famous in Britain. The so-called Rendlesham incident involved reports by military personnel of strange lights and a triangular craft with enigmatic hieroglyphs near RAF Woodbridge. The event, witnessed even by high-ranking officials, included multiple observations of unexplained lights that beamed rays to the ground. The incident left impressions so vivid that a sculpture was erected on the spot in its memory, captivating UFO enthusiasts for decades. In the forests of Chernobyl was discovered a truly horrifying sight. Thousands of gas masks piled in huge heaps on the ground. These grim remnants were likely not properly disposed of after the nuclear catastrophe, when during decontamination work it was still very dangerous to be there due to radiation. Although its level has decreased significantly over the decades, these dreadful masks remain silent witnesses of one of the most frightening nuclear accidents in world history. During the pandemic, when trips abroad were postponed for better times, researchers went to the aircraft graveyard in Vchansk, near Kharkiv. The airfield once belonged to the DOSAAF flying school, but after 2017, the airfield territory stopped being guarded. Now, at the site of the bustling training center, a surreal spectacle presents itself. Dozens of abandoned planes scattered across an empty field. More than 30 aircraft, including L-29 jet trainers, a turboprop AN-24, and the versatile AN-2, also known as the Maze plane or Anushka, as well as Mi-2 and Mi-8 helicopters, have become defenseless against vandalism. Imagine the shock of Vietnamese farmers who were simply digging their land when they encountered something metallic. What lay buried beneath their property was, contrary to expectations, not a treasure hoard. All this time they had literally been living on a volcano right under their feet in the ground, slept a huge, unexploded bomb weighing more than 1 ton and 2.5 meters long. It lay only 2 meters below the house level and was fully operational. Who knows what could have led to detonation? Military specialists immediately arrived to evacuate the huge munition, and no one and nothing was harmed during the operation. The family remained unharmed despite having lived right above a relic of war for decades, unaware of it. Try arguing now that fate does not protect someone. Historians exploring old Soviet military sites discovered in an abandoned missile silo a find that decades ago could have made someone a billionaire. Yes, these pieces of paper would once have been worth a fortune. Billions of Soviet rubles were dumped into the underground chamber, simply being disposed of. Apparently, someone hurriedly and carelessly destroyed money in the early 1990s when everything in Russia changed overnight. The banknotes have now turned to dust. They are useless as currency, and having ended up in a dump, they create a grim monument to the collapse of the vast Soviet empire. That is how our episode turned out. If you liked it and you want to see the next part or something similar, write about it in the comments and give us a like. Subscribe to our channel, and very soon a new episode on another interesting topic will be released. In the meantime, watch one of our previous videos that have already appeared on your screen.